Is this... Hello, my fellow Americans. My name is President James Monroe, and today I'm going to talk to you about misinformation. Although, in case you can't tell, I'm not actually President James Monroe. Did you know that about 75% of all statistics are made up? I didn't know that, because I made it up. People say things that aren't true all the time, right? Sometimes that false information is part of a joke or a story, because everyone knows that spiders don't actually use the World Wide Web. And nobody watching Stranger Things actually believes in terrifying monsters, just people who put pineapple on pizza. However, sometimes the false information is misinterpreted as, or presented as, true information. And that's when things get problematic. It's important to make the distinction that when someone does not know that the information they're saying is false, it's called misinformation. But if they know that they're lying, it's called disinformation. In this speech, I will discuss both. But either way, false information has likely been a problem plaguing us since we could speak. It is very important that we learn how to combat false information, for it has cost people their money, their friends, and sometimes their lives. And in the modern age, we are constantly bombarded by dubious information on a daily basis. Someone in the audience is probably on their phone right now, looking at Twitter or TikTok or something like that. You know who you are. And that post you just saw, the author is lying through their teeth. But do you trust me to say that? Up to you. If you were a caveman, true information would be very important for you. You would need to know which dinosaurs you could safely ride into battle. The answer to that question, of course, would be none of them. They were all dead before the first hominids evolved. But if that were the case, you'd really want to know which ones were carnivores and which ones were herbivores. Because if you got that wrong, you wouldn't be alive for very long. False information is dangerous. I venture to say it's one of the most dangerous things in the world. In fact, I venture to say I don't need a cited source for that. I believe your own experiences with the COVID-19 pandemic are enough. You saw millions of people online spreading lies and disinformation about the disease, and I'm sure you've heard some of that conspiracy theory rhetoric.
COVID-19 isn't real. But if it is real, it's not a big deal. But if it is a big deal, it's because the Chinese waging biological warfare on America. But if it's not that, then it's the liberals trying to force you to get vaccines. And those vaccines contain trackers, and they'll give your kids autism. And they'll increase your chances of getting mad cow disease. You want an alternative to the vaccine? Try taking lethal amounts of horse dewormer.
All of this nonsense being spewed by people who, quite frankly, had no idea what they were talking about. All while millions of people were dying of plague or losing their jobs or developing mental illness from prolonged isolation. The pandemic has had an undeniable and irreversible impact on the entire world. And yet some people would have you believe it was never any more dangerous than the common cold. And part of the reason why we're still dealing with the consequences of that pandemic is that huge portions of the country were falling to lies about it. A study done by an organization called KFF shows that about a third of adult Americans believe 4 false statements about COVID-19 when given only 8. That's 50%. And we cannot allow that level of confusion to happen again. But we will, because false information spreads very quickly. A lie travels halfway around the world while the truth still puts on its shoes. Mark Twain said that. Or did he? The quote is commonly misattributed to Mark Twain, but in actuality, he never said it. There's no evidence, at least. And in that regard, the quote proves itself. A lie did travel halfway around the world. Did any of you ever play that children's game called Telephone? Basically, you get a bunch of kids in a line, and the first kid would start for a word. They'd whisper that word to the next person in line. And then the next kid would whisper to the next person in line. That would keep going and going until eventually you reach the last person. And they say the word they heard out loud. Often the last person's idea of the word greatly different from the first person's idea. So when that would happen, we'd go back to the line, ask each person what they heard, to figure out where things went wrong. Now, I was always a little rapscallion who would change the word to something entirely different for my own amusement. I was spreading disinformation. I was intentionally changing the information for my own personal benefit. But, even when everyone was playing to win, the word would still often get messed up, and this was not always out of malice. Human memory is very unreliable. Human bias is prevalent in all of our thoughts. And when you have all these different people with their own muddled memory and cognitive biases, retelling the same information over and over again, things are bound to change over time as it goes through each person's mind. Furthermore, the most sensational headlines will always be the fastest. And I have a personal story to tell about this. Back in December 2021, this school was dealing with some safety issues, and the one that I'm thinking of specifically was a bomb threat. Except this bomb threat wasn't directed towards our school. It wasn't even directed towards our school district. Despite this, one of my friends somehow saw the bomb threat, thought it was directed towards our school, and told all of his friends to evacuate immediately. He posted this onto a group chat where someone corrected him pretty quickly, but by then the news had spread and the damage was already done. Half the school had jumped ship by lunchtime. There's no double-checking the facts when things like guns and bombs are involved, because our brain converts to the instinctual desire to warn the rest of our friends and then get the hell out of Dodge. Because when a crow thinks it sees a predator, it doesn't stop to make sure it is a predator. It warns the rest of its flock if allowed to squawk, and we aren't any different. In the modern age, information is exchanged at a rate never seen before. Millions of games of telephone go on at once via our mobile devices, our telephones. And this has led to a huge rise in information. With it, a huge rise in both misinformation and disinformation. Because no flock of crows has ever seen this many squawkers before. And it leaves our society in a constant state of running from ghosts. So how do we stop running from ghosts? I do have a few tips and tricks to help us all. Because after everything I just told you about the nature of false information, I'm sure you all would trust me completely. Now, the first thing I always do is to double check and triple check your sources. If you see an article titled, "This spider in the Amazon rainforest is the size of a car," make sure it's talking about an actual car and not a Hot Wheels story. This might sound obvious and condescending even, but you'd be surprised by how many people don't do the basic due diligence of checking their sources before they cite them. Furthermore, there are three kinds of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. Mark Twain said it. Or did he? He himself attributes the original quote to Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli. But I digress. The quote rings true because people have this weird misconception that numbers don't lie when they absolutely do. Let's say I tell you that according to my anonymous survey, 95% of all women aged above 30 have never been in a sexual relationship. Now let me add a little detail that I performed that survey at none. It's not so scientific now. Now let me add this little detail that I never performed that survey at all. Always check where people are getting their numbers from, because numbers can lie. In fact, let's go back to one of my previous sources. I cited an organization called KFF. But I never told you anything about KFF. I didn't tell you who did the survey, when they did the survey, why they did the survey, how they did the survey. I didn't even tell you what KFF stood for. I'll let you figure that out in a moment. But obviously, we can't go Sherlock Holmes on every single source on its sites. However, you can usually spot some obvious discrepancies with critical thinking skills. That's the issue right there, critical thinking skills. It's something that, it's the key to stopping most misinformation and disinformation, but it's something humans tend to lack at critical moments. Now, we all know that we're flawed, and knowing that we're flawed is helpful, because we're all flawed, we're all human, but we are most vulnerable to false information that plays on our existing fears and biases. So knowing how we are flawed specifically can come a long way in combating the spread of false information. And combating the spread of false information is very important, because it allows you and others to conduct themselves better in many ways. As James Monroe once said, get your facts first, then you can distort them as you please. Except James Monroe never said that. That was Mark Twain.